I was having a thought and I wanted to try to get it on video here. So, as far as reality is concerned, we live in a shared reality to a certain extent, in that all the separate beings that we are have shared experiences. Like, we know that we live on a planet. There's some debate about what the shape of it is, but the sun brings warmth and life and different things. There's plants, there's oceans, there's, all the physical things about the earth, borders, countries, all that stuff. We still fight about all that kind of thing, but that's kind of a shared reality. We all partake of that reality, but below that level of the shared reality, there is individual realities. And these individual realities, it's funny, like in a video game, if you're playing third person, right, you're up above your character, but some of the older games used to have what was it? You used to have she got to have some attention right now. They used to have the status and different stats about the character right above their head, right? And so as you looked out and could see the different characters out in the screen out here, the information on top of them was visible. So, like, imagine that, only instead of stats up above your head, you've got stats about your consciousness level, or your level of what would be another good word? Spiritual development, I guess. So, well, you really wanting some attention tonight, aren't you? So anyhow, we're all walking around in these individual realities because each one of us has very specific things within our lives, within our days, within our realities. I'll use that word, realities that we pay attention to. There's things that we have to do in our life, right? So each one of us has a family. We got to deal with our family. We've got to deal with work. We've got to deal with going out and buying clothes. There's things we have to go deal with, right? But the things we pay attention to, the news, the current events, the whatever it may be. Some people pay attention to a lot of painting. Some people pay attention to a lot of gardening. Some people pay attention to a lot of social movements. Some people pay a lot of attention to a lot of things. Those things determine what your reality is. And I may not have the same attention, the things grabbing my attention that you do. So let's say that in your reality, you, I don't know, you had to suffer through satanic ritual abuse while you were younger, right? Your reality includes that and the outfall of that and all the things that stem from that and all the experiences and all the thoughts and all the things and traumas and everything that you have in your experience going forward. That's your reality. And you'll have realizations about all that stuff as you start to heal from it, as you go through your life. But I probably won't have that direct experience. However, I might have, well, not me. Well, let's just say this. My father experienced getting cancer. So that was in his experience. And everything that came from that was in his experience, right? But we're family and we're close, so there was some shared experience there as well. The point being, his experience was different than my experience growing up. I didn't have to do all the stuff that he had to go through with the cancer, right? My mother and him took care of all that kind of stuff. And this fellow over here, right? So all of us have all these individual things going on. That's our individual reality, right? So when we can understand that there's a reason why a person's reality is the way it is generally. Sometimes, most of the time, I'm going to say it's a function of the experiences they've had. Generally traumatic experiences, but good experiences form you as well. But part of your psyche is called this thing called the ego, and I use the ego in the terms of Carl Jung, who was a student of Freud. He kind of went a little bit different with what his definition of ego was, but anyhow, when a person can finally within their individual reality experience an awakening of sorts, where all of a sudden now you're starting to become aware of things in a way that you were previously not aware of. Now, a real easy explanation of what that may sound, it sounds woo-woo and all that kind of stuff, but let's think about this. Prior to 2020, let's say 2019, we knew some things about the pharmaceutical industry and we knew some things about the government, but we had no idea the depth and the magnitude of what was going on between those two entities until they unleashed a virus on the world and then conveniently had the fix for that violent. Okay, the common cold is something that you can't fix. Even the flu is something you can't fix. Go home and write it out. But this we could. We found a vaccine. 4 companies found a vaccine within a year, right? And we can't fix the flu for generations, but we can fix this one within a year with 4 different companies, right? So anyway, we woke up to what was really happening there. And then the control that was exerted over all of that, from the government only compounded the problem, right? The pharmaceutical companies, and they were in cahoots with these guys that made the freaking virus, right? All this money is like. But anyway, we woke up to that stuff, right? We became aware of something we previously were not aware of, and it shocked like the world, right? So we were like, but anyhow, that's an awakening of a sort. There's many different types of awakenings, right? So a lot of things that happen in society in the day-to-day, right, wakes people up, right? Charlie Kirk's murder, right? That's going to wake some people up to certain things. What the government's doing in different places here and there, that's going to wake some people up. And people are going to wake up left and right. The spiritual thing doesn't give a shit about your politics. Whether you're left or right. If you're left, there's people on the right that are right. And if you're on the right, there's people on the left that are right. Correct. You're just going to have to get over your shit, right? That's just the way it is. Anyhow, individual realities, right? So as we walk around with these individual realities and we start to awaken, the best way to to make change in other people's realities is to help them start to see and understand that there's more to the story than what we previously. I have a long background in organized religion, I'll say. I'm not going to, people who know me know my story, my history anyway. But suffice it to say that, I found out there's more to the story, and there is more to the story. Anyhow, I wanted to make sure I voiced what I was thinking about this individual reality within a greater reality that's a shared reality. All these little, so there's billions of us running around that are experiencing separate realities, like, and so there's a guy who came up with I can't remember what his name was. Anyhow, it talks about different levels of consciousness. Excuse me. Different levels of consciousness. And our emotions are greatly involved in the determination of what level you're at. And I hate to use level, but I mean literally, because you're talking about things that spiral. It's a double spiral. It spirals both down. As it goes down, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as it goes up, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. At the bottom is anger, grief, sorrow, hatred, disappointment, as you work your way up. Finally, towards the middle of the thing, you get to a place where you're actually neutral. You're accepting of what is reality, right? You're not fighting it. But from there up, right, the very top, the pinnacle, the highest emotion is like love, peace, joy, all those things. And so as you look out across this landscape, if you were to see, with your eyes, this video game you're in, where you're back here and you're third person and you're seeing everybody's stats on top of their head, they're all going to be a different color, a different level. Everybody's at a different level of consciousness based on what they've experienced and what they've understood and what they've sought for, But all these different levels are going on all at the same time, right? And so, if you predominantly live in like grief or despair or, I know people who do live like that, right? Your predominant emotion is that you're at a very low level, and I'm sorry to say you're awful tasty to energies that you don't want feeding on you. Anyway, point is, you can learn to transcend these different levels, right? You can go from anger and all the way up to joy, but you got to do some inner work to make all this happen. To go up this scale, you've got to do some inner work. And the people, as you look out across this landscape and you see all these stats across the people who, if we're going to say like violet, maybe indigo is the top color, right? And below it's violet, and then there's blue, and then there's green, and then there's yellow, and then orange, and then red. That's going to correspond to what level of consciousness you are. And that's strictly based off of your predominant emotion. If you operate in, you're even keeled, right? You don't get happy, you don't get sad. You're just kind of like, all right, hey, everything's great, then you're right here in the middle, right? You're already higher than everybody that's kind of living in, the people that's living in the grief and stuff. They lose a loved one or car wreck takes somebody or what have you, and they stay there. I mean, they're there for years and years and years and years. And I'm not downplaying grief because everybody does it differently. However, when you make that your predominant emotion, vibration, there's a principle that is ruled by all this, that like what you put out external of you is what you'll receive back. And so Eeyore, from Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, oh, woe is me, oh, can't do anything right, might as well have not been born, and, all these things, right? Not going to have a happy existence. How are you going to find happiness in that? It's up to you to find the happiness. Eeyore is not looking for happiness. He's not going to find happiness. His attention is on his woes. So this is circling back to what I said earlier. Our reality is what we pay attention to. He's paying attention, Eeyore, he's paying attention to his woes. And that's all he sees. We know some people in the news right now that are Eeyore. So what you pay attention to is so important because it determines the emotion that drives your entire elevation, your level. There are a lot of people right now who are in the United States that are, well, even in the other countries, they're rioting like all the time. That's what they do. They're constantly aggrieved about something, and they live for the next thing to be aggrieved about. It's what they draw their energy from, right? But that person is always in a state of anger. Always. They're always mad about something. Their reality includes that. And what they give out in anger is what they get back from their world. So all of us are that way. What we pay attention to is what makes up our reality. All the shit above our head that you're looking out in this landscape and seeing all these people, that is what you pay attention to. Your reality is what you pay attention to. So, if you don't like your reality, change what you pay attention to. It really is that simple. Now, there's challenges along the way. That's a simple statement, right? Giving up your attachment to a lot of the shit that causes you to do those things, that's where your challenge is going to come, right? And attachments can be anything. It could be, you could be attached to it. You could be attached to a parking place, right? Let's say you've been parking in front of your apartment in the same spot for 5 years, 6 years. And all of a sudden somebody decides they're going to park there every day. You're going to park. You don't have any idea where you got to park. The building's full. You might have to park in another building now. Somebody decides they're going to start taking your spot. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about pulling up? You see another car right there. How do you feel about that? If you feel some sort of way, you have an attachment to that parking spot, right? If you're okay with parking anywhere else, like it's no big deal, water off a duck's back, you don't have a problem with an attachment for that. But you may have an attachment for people, right? What happens when a loved one dies? What happens when, that's a big one right there. What happens when a loved one dies? How attached are you? You're going to find out. Because more than likely you're going to be hit with grief. Not more than likely. Absolutely, you're going to be hit with more grief. But the length of time that grief holds on is going to be determined by the level of attachment that you had to that person. Some people are greatly attached to others. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm getting myself all ready, going again here. I had to shut down the house. I'm saying that your attachment will determine the level of suffering that you experience. Attachment to anything causes suffering. And so there is a way to be fully invested in everything that life brings you without being attached to the outcome of it, right? That's another thing. Outcomes, right? You can be attached to an outcome, right? You have an assumption in talking to another person that something's going to work out a certain way. What happens if it doesn't work out that way? You're going to get upset. You're going to scream and yell and okay. So a little bit of anger is going to be okay. But are you going to hang on to that? Are you a grudge holder? Are you going to hang on to that anger for years and years and years? I mean, okay, so you got screwed on this deal and you never deal with this guy again. In 5 years, you still going to hold that grudge against that guy? That's attachment. That attachment to that outcome that didn't go the way it did caused something within you, and you know, now there's suffering there. I mean, you may say there's not, but you know, you'll find out if you continue to pursue spiritual things. You'll find out you're still attached. I mean, you didn't fix that. Anyway, so that was a thought I wanted to get out. This inside of a greater reality. And I don't have that little piece of paper that I had that drawn on. There's layers to all this. But the greater reality, the shared reality, is one that we all agree is on the. We can all agree there's a tower of, you know, what is not a tower? Eiffel Tower, right? We can all agree there's an Eiffel Tower. There's a Grand Canyon, right? We all agree there is one. It's over there, right? Shared reality. Within that reality, for each individual person, is this whole different reality going on with each and every person who, as dictated by what they pay attention to, are experiencing separate realities within the greater reality. And to further make it complex a little bit, some of these experiences within our reality will also be shared with other people. However, what they draw from the experience will be different from what you draw from the experience. Trying to get two people to describe the same event in two separate rooms, you get two different stories. So this is how reality works. So now, when someone tries to force an individual reality up into the shared reality, right, before somebody else is ready for that reality, you're also going to cause suffering. There's a timing to everything. So in my country, in the United States, there's a lot of upheaval going on in the last week. That's a very difficult situation to navigate. However, the people who are creating there's two ways to look at the problem. There's two sides to see it from. If you're looking at it from this direction, you think X, Y, and Z. If you're looking at it from this side over here, you're thinking P, D, and Q. Both of them can be correct. For instance, hold on a second. This piece of paper. I've got a guy, I hold it up to a guy who looks like just like this, right? I asked the guy, what shape is this? He says, it's a square or a rectangle. It's a rectangle. Okay, great. I go to another guy. I don't know how well I can do this. I hold it up like this. And I can't get it flat and have it sitting without having a kink in it. So, but anyhow, my point is, it would look like a line, right? Or a dash if I hold it up to this guy like this. Which guy is correct? That's the question. And that's exactly what's going on in our world today. Which one's correct? One side will say, we just want you to follow the laws that are here and obey the police. The other one would say, you can't freaking persecute people that's trying to get a fucking better life. Right? Who's right? They're both right. And they can both be right. Okay? Somebody who's completely lost in a different level of emotion, right? They can't. This is another great point. When you're operating at, remember we used the different colors, right? Indigo, violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. A guy who's operating in the orange cannot see and understand what's going on with the guy who's operating in the green. Doesn't make sense to him. Can't comprehend it. That's not his reality. He's not had the experiences that requires in order to participate in it. Can't see it. Likewise. Now, it kind of doesn't work that way down. So the people are up here that indigo, violet, blue, and green, specifically, they should be able to, and I think largely do, see what's happening below for the people in the red, orange, and yellow, and have empathy from having been there, right? And going through what they're going through. However, whatever parts of their reality were there when they started the ascension into a higher spirituality, which gained them through that spiritual walk the ability to be in the green. Once you're in the green, now you've opened up the blue, the violet, and the indigo. Right. So while you can empathize with those down below you in that level, you still carry with you, right? So if you were sympathetic previously to the view of the right, you're carrying that with you unless you specifically purge that. And at some point in time you will, or you should, because the left-right dichotomy is an illusion, right? And so eventually you'll shed that. You'll see that both sides have a point. They're just coming at each other from different levels of understanding, and they're conflicting because they're not on the same level. They're not. You have this mixture of levels in both sides, right? But together they're not congruent enough to be able to see the point of view and the opinion of the other person because of all the experiences over here versus all the experiences over there. It creates a wall. We see that wall. We understand that it's there. What can help us penetrate that wall is trying to pursue what I would call a spiritual awakening, growth in the spirit realm, which takes actual physical effort. You have to. There's a lot of learning to do, a lot of places to go to find information. You don't even know what. Okay, so when you're operating with the spirit, this comes first. You seek out the spirit. I'm Christian, right? This came from that background. I alluded to it earlier, but that's what it is, right? So I already had an understanding of what the spirit was between the spirit and the physical, right? There's two different things. There are benevolent spirits and not so benevolent spirits. The benevolent spirits will lead you. Become sensitive to that leading, then follow. That's how you do it. And the spirit will lead you into what you need first, and then what you need second, and then what you need third, and then what you need fourth, on down the line. You don't have to figure it out. All you have to do is be sensitive to what the spirit is saying. If the spirit shows you all of a sudden, bang, there's a video about, pick something, inner child healing. Whoa, that's a pretty cool video, man. Wow, I didn't realize all that kind of stuff. What? Ooh, wow. And then so the next day, right, you're reading this magazine or whatever, and there somebody was talking about, oh, wow, I went through this thing. It's called inner child healing. Have you ever heard of it? Oh, what? That's twice in 2 days I've heard that. That's weird. And so then the next day you listen to your, I don't know, Jesus radio. I don't remember what channels are playing Jesus music, but they're going to talk about self-help and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden they mention something about some dude that went through some inner child healing. And you're like, what in the world is going on? I'm hearing this so many times. Well, my friend, that is a spirit. And that spirit is leading you to something. Showed it to you 3 times. After you've seen it 3 times, you should be saying, must be something to that. I'm going to look into it. And then get on your little device here and start poking in the little numbers and find out about inner child healing and start reading about it and finding out about it and reading stories about it. And the next thing you know, you're going through it. And you come out of the other side of it healed in ways you had no idea you were even broken. And then the spirit takes you on to number 2. And this is how you end up in the green, in the violet, in the blue, in the violet, in the indigo. That's how you get there. And you don't have to do it alone. Now, organized religion can help. But it can also hinder. There are things that you need to know that are not taught in Christian church. They're not. And that's okay. But Spirit's going to lead you where you need to go. And, I hear a lot of Christians talk about, well, I'm going to do what God wants me to do, and I'm just, yep. Well, then do it, right? If your pastor says, do not look at Buddhism, it's evil, you'll go to hell, but the Spirit is telling you, hey, read this. Who are you going to listen to? You going to listen to your pastor? You going to listen to the Spirit? What is the Spirit supposed to do? If you're a Christian, what does that Spirit do for you? The Holy Spirit. What's his purpose? What's he there for? Do you know? I know what he's there for. That's why I'm telling you what I'm telling you. He's there to bring you the deep things of God. Well, how are you going to get the deep things of God? Well, you don't even know who he is or how he's talking to him. Yeah, I mean, how would you know his voice? Well, Jesus says, well, you know, my sheep know my voice. Well, do you? Do you? Because he ain't got a body no more, right? He transcended the body. So what does that mean? Well, that means he's a spirit, doesn't it? And because he's a spirit, he got to talk to you a little bit different way. It's not going to be like your brother talking to you. Now, that's at first. As you work on your sensitivity, and you're going to do this through meditation, and you're not taught to meditate through organized religion, at least not the Abrahamic. No. Poo-pooed. Majorly poo-pooed. But anyway, when you silence this voice that goes on in your head all the time, 100% of the time, this is what I talked about Carl Jung earlier, the ego. That is the ego. It's a onboard companion program that compiles and collates all experiences in your life for eternity till now, and has made a judgment about everything, and he's got everything worked out. He's only there to protect you, right? But he's the voice in your head, and he's not you. And when you can silence him long enough, you will hear you, and you will hear Spirit. And when you do that, and Spirit says, hey, go over and take a look at that. And that is a book by Lao Tzu. It's called The Tao. What am I going to do with that? Read it. Okay. And you read it. There's going to be a few things in there that sticks out to you. That's the way it always works. Every time. There's going to be some things in there that stick out to you. You remember lesson number 1? Right? You saw it 2 or 3 times, and then you were like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should do something with that. You're going to read through this. And there's going to be a couple things in there that stick out to you, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And you're going to read it 4 or 5 times, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. That's like eye-opening shit right there. That's wow. But you know what happens? What happens is, in the next few days, maybe a week, you're going to have 2 or 3 different things that you hear somebody say one of those things you read in that book by Lao Tzu. Somebody's going to quote him somewhere. You're going to hear it. It'll be on a video. It'll be on a magazine cover. It'll be on a radio. It'll be on whatever. You'll see it somewhere 2 or 3 times. And you'll be like, wow, that's pretty cool. I wonder what that's all about. And then suddenly you're going to get some kind of a lesson about that thing, right? And you'll be like, whoa, mind blown. That is so cool. And you wouldn't have gotten that revelation. Number 1, had you not followed the Spirit. Number 2, had you not done what he said, and that's read something that's not the Bible. You just read the Tao. And it gave you a mind-blowing revelation that you otherwise wouldn't have had. I say they. It's not like a conspiracy. Well, it's kind of like a conspiracy, kind of. You're told not to read that. You are told not to read that. You're told not to read the Bhagavad Gita. You're told not to read any of the Hindu scriptures. You're told not to read Jainism. You're told not to read Gnosticism. You're told not to read, not to read, not to read. And it's been my experience, and I will tell everybody that just items like I'm just talking about here, like you get into the Tao and, you're going to find a gem in there, something that's going to create some major revelation for you, right? Personally. In there. That's a gem. And my advice to you is pick up that gem and put it in your pack and take it with you. Same thing with even in Buddhism, right? So you're going to talk about the Four Noble Truths, right? And I mean, they're so simple, right? So simple. Gems. There is suffering is number one. Number two, you will suffer. And number three, there is an end to the suffering. Number four is you can help end the suffering by doing these, the Eightfold Path. What was the Eightfold Path? Well, I mean, I don't know if I can remember all 8 of them right off the bat, but it's right thinking, right speech, right actions, right mind, right. There's 3 other things that if you do these things, you almost eliminate suffering from your life. Well, that seems to be kind of important. I mean, okay, it's Buddhism, right? But if it's going to stop suffering or help me stop suffering, why wouldn't I want to look at that? And so I did. And I can tell you, it stopped suffering. Very, very good stuff. And you don't have to... Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Spirit led me there. Hey, look at this. Wow. In the way that I just told you, right? How many times does it have to be? You're talking to Spirit, you're doing the thing, you're driving down the road, you're talking Spirit, you're having a conversation, you're thinking, well, this is blah, 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 and you have the radio on, and all of a sudden, and you're thinking this thought, like, how is it the sky can be so blue? And at the same time you say that, the song on the radio says, how is it the sky can be so blue? Right? Or something of that nature. Somebody will say it, right? At the same time you said it. Same words at the same time, right? These are things to show you that, hey, Spirit's close. Spirit's on your side. Spirit's right here. Jesus is my co-pilot. Well, Spirit's with you. I mean, so anyway, the realities. So, as you walk along the path of life and you find these gems and you start putting these gems in your pack and you start taking them with you, you're going to ascend through these colors. Generally can be spoken, right? So the green color is supposed to be driven by love. That's what will open you up or initiate you into that green, right? And generally what will happen, or what I've seen happen, I mean, it can happen anyway, but when someone has a real experience, with Jesus, right? Because Jesus is like the embodiment of love. That was his whole shtick, right? So when you have a seriously real encounter with Jesus, that opens up, right? And suddenly, and many of you have been there, it's different. Everything's different. It's different. Everything is, you can't even explain it. It's so different. Well, that's jumping realities. That's why you can't explain it. You've never been there before. You can't, how do I explain what just happened? Well, you just jumped realities, right? Now, unfortunately, in organized religion, a lot of people think that's it. That's the only jumping reality that you can do. Well, it's not, right? There's more. I said earlier, there's more. And as I said, these gems over here that you find, these different ways of all of these gems, of the things you're going to learn from all these other places, all these insights, all this kind of stuff, and you start doing some of these other practices as well, in instilling your mind and meditating and calming that ego and even understanding some of these concepts. I mean, if you don't understand what the ego is, how it's constructed, that it's a separate entity from you, and that there's another voice in here that you need to be listening to, how are you going to hear the voice, the small and still, if you got this loudmouth brawler that's your ego that won't shut up? I mean, literally won't shut up. And so you have to learn how to do that kind of stuff. And if you won't learn how to do that stuff, you'll never overcome that. You'll never see that unless something else happens, right? You have to. Now, for some people, they get initiated through Christ or through Jesus, right? They get a real quick glimpse at being able to feel and hear the Spirit, right? But if they don't continue in it, and if they don't exercise that muscle, slowly but surely it goes away, and then you can't sense that anymore. You're not being led because you can't hear. The only time you can be led is if you're being, if you can hear. Now, I kind of had said early on, Lord, I'm going to go on this trip. I want you to take me where you want me to go. And I went, and I said, I don't care what happens as far as the religious people in my life. I don't care. Okay, number one, I don't care if I have to go look at whatever, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. Shoot, I was looking in flat earth too. I mean, all kinds of different things, just everything. But had I not decided that I would, right, Lord, lead me, and I'm not sensitive enough to hear that leading, I'm going to go off wherever. I'm going to end up God knows where. So you have to be sensitive to that. You have to constantly work on that. It's not something that you can easily just do. I mean, you have to develop this stuff. It's not. That's why I say spiritual awakening is not all roses and flowers and light and love. And, a lot of the people who are screaming light and love right now are the most hateful people you can see. Why? Because they've had a taste of what the light and love is, and they want it, and they know it, but they're still stuck, rooted in some of these lower levels of, right, anger, rage, all that kind of stuff, insecurities, all these different things. What you see is that's they're breaking out of this, right? They get glimpses of what this is up here, and they like it, the light and the love and all that. But to embody it all the time is difficult. You have to start to shed these things, purposely shed these things to move yourself. The weight of these things, once you shed, think of these as little weights, and once you shed the weight of these things, you rise. So, when people become Christian right off the bat, a lot of times they get this, right? They sense it. But if you don't exercise that, you lose it. and the Spirit will lead you. Now, well, I think that's probably enough for now. I've been on here for quite a while. I just wanted to get that thought down here. Thanks.